we can kind of work through this. So here's what I really want to talk about today. So with Project Cortex, Microsoft has introduced a lot of innovations for knowledge management and intelligent content services, and I'm all in on Project Cortex. But a lot of what you can do to encourage knowledge management or to promote knowledge management in your organization can be done with tools and capabilities that you already have in your toolkit today. And so what I want to talk about today is a little bit of sort of what you've got already and how you can most effectively take advantage of it. So as with any of our other kinds of conferences like this, it's great that we have sponsors that help us put on these events. So I'm happy to be here. I hope you will ask lots of questions or at least engage. And if something resonates, please let me know. Hardest part about doing these things remotely is wondering if you're connecting with anyone. You know, in the past 12 months have really transformed the way we work for pretty much everybody. First of all, we don't dress like this anymore. And second of all, we're more likely to be sitting instead of standing. And third, we're all still a little bit overwhelmed with all the different ways we have to connect and collaborate. I'm a consultant. I work with a lot of organizations, and I was literally this week with 2 different clients having conversations about the overwhelming landscape of opportunities that we have to connect, and collaborate in Microsoft 365. And it can be overwhelming if this is brand new to you or your organization. And while we can clearly see the vision for Project Cortex and the opportunity to truly transform the way we work, just by way of background, I come from the knowledge management space. Most of my life right now is spent working on intranets, but I used to be the director of knowledge management for a global consultancy. And I'll be honest with you, 25 years ago, I dreamed about a solution that is in fact Project Cortex today, where all the information I need about the key topics in the organization would be dynamically curated for me and delivered to me wherever I am without me having to do any work. And the idea of being able to write a document, mention a term, and have relevant information that we know as an organization pop up for me was something that, you know, really back in the day was something we could only dream about. And yet that reality is here today. But not every organization is going to make the investment in Project Cortex, the part of Project Cortex actually that hasn't yet been released, the topics part. And while we're waiting, I think it's important to recognize that we have a lot of superpowers already. And we don't necessarily only have to think about Project Cortex. I think of Project Cortex now as the icing on the cake of transforming the flow of knowledge. But even before we get there, we have an opportunity to educate and inform the people in our organization about ways we can do things that will improve the flow of knowledge. Before I even talk about any of it, I want to say that I focus on the people side of technology, not a deep developer. And when it comes to knowledge management, I don't care what anybody says and how great the technology is. Technology alone is not going to make knowledge flow happen in your organization. There still needs to be some people and process things enabled. For example, if people don't feel comfortable having an open and transparent conversation, I don't care how many Yammer communities you have to engage leadership, to connect with like-minded people in communities of practice, nothing is going to happen. So your culture is going to drive your ability to get the most value out of any aspect of Microsoft 365. So we need some sort of cultural and foundational prerequisites in order to make knowledge flow really happen. And at the end of the day, this is one of my favorite quotes from a very dear friend, Stan Garfield. And what Stan said is, you know, knowledge flow, knowledge management doesn't happen until someone actually reuses something. And what our goal is in any knowledge management initiative is to create opportunities so that we can take advantage of the knowledge that we have in the organization, to reuse existing work, to repeat existing and standard and proven processes, and to deliver that information to people when and where they need it. And ultimately, that's the goal of Project Cortex, but it's also the broader goal of knowledge management. So what I want to talk about in the remainder of our time is how we can create some of these opportunities for knowledge to flow in the daily course of our work with the tools that we have at our disposal today. And I'm going to divide it up into content control, content management, content discovery, communities of practice, which are kind of what I'll call the foundational experience for knowledge management, how we bring that information where people are working, and then how we know that we're successful in the form of metrics. Every organization I've ever worked with suffers from a disease. I call it versionitis. And you know the symptoms, you know, when people email files back and forth, and even when they save files with .v1, .final, .v3, .v3 final _sh comments. And even if you have educated people that they have to save links or share links instead of documents, file naming conventions that don't leverage the capabilities we have in Microsoft 365 creates this opportunity for versionitis, meaning I never know when I see .v2, is there a .v3? And if I see .final, can I trust that this is in fact the final version of any document? Real-time co-authoring for me, enabling or informing your users about that superpower is the cure for versionitis. And the light bulb that I see go off when people understand how they can get rid of all those duplicates is not only because we eliminate multiple versions, but the poor person who has to consolidate feedback from multiple people will now find that their job is so much easier because all of the comments are in one place. So this is what I'll call the most often sort of the knowledge flow superpower that is most often forgotten. Other things that Microsoft 365 enables in SharePoint is that no matter where you see your files, you have all kinds of capabilities to preview what you're working on, to assign metadata. One of my favorite features actually is anytime you see a name, you have people information anywhere. But think about the way we experience files in Microsoft 365 is that this is actually a very common experience. It's now even delivered into Teams that if you see a file, you can see all the metadata about that file. The one important thing that I have had to communicate over and over again to clients who are relatively new in this space is that there's only one file storage location in Microsoft 365, and that's SharePoint. So there are no files that are stored in Teams. There technically are no files that are actually stored in OneDrive. OneDrive is a view of a SharePoint site that lives behind the scenes. And while you don't have access to all of the SharePointy features on that site, OneDrive is the file viewer of the world. All files are hosted in SharePoint. So there's really only one place for files to live, and very soon there will be only one place for video to live as well, as Microsoft moves the content storage for what is for Microsoft Stream back into SharePoint, where we can then use metadata to organize it and the existing permissions to add permissions to those files, and more importantly, apply our retention and access policies the way we are managing all the other content in the suite. And so what we're seeing is that we have this convergent files experience, which also helps manage the knowledge of the organization. What I also really love, I actually had a client complain to me about this literally today, that on their current on-prem SharePoint, the worst thing about it is you find a document, if you can find it, and once you find a file or a folder, you can't remember how to get back to it. And this is a feature, this new feature of adding a shortcut to a folder that you find anywhere in the system, adding that to your personal OneDrive is a great way to keep the folders shared with you, easily accessible to you, allowing you to keep the files that you work with directly in the flow of your work. Another great feature, and this is one of my favorite features about sort of keeping people in the flow, is the Pages experience in SharePoint Online allows us to target information directly to the logged in user. Not only can we target Pages, but at least in my tenant, this is just rolling out right now, we can also target Pages, navigation, and the newest feature, links. So we can now target links to different audiences. Again, creating that experience where we're not overwhelming people with information, but bringing information to them where they are. So another great superpower that not only can be delivered on the desktop, of course, but also on mobile devices. So a really critical way to ensure that knowledge flows in the organization is to bring it to people on the devices where they're working. Every app in Microsoft 365 is designed to work on mobile devices. And that allows us to think about work not being what we do, about work being what we do, not where we do it. Bring the information to me on any device that I'm working on, again, allows me to keep knowledge in the flow of my day-to-day work. The life cycle of sort of one of the ways we manage this in SharePoint, and I think this is often very difficult, but once you explain this to people, I think it makes life a teeny bit easier, is understanding where we should store information. That typically we're going to start by working on information privately until we're ready to share it with one or more people. So OneDrive is the place my files live, or my content lives in general, until I'm ready to share it with my team, at which point that life cycle says move it to a team so that everyone on my team has access to it. And when that file, if it's intended for broad distribution, that's when it moves out of a team and into a SharePoint communication site so I can share that file with the rest of the organization. Understanding this and combining this with search, this helps us understand where to put things. Search doesn't actually care where things live. If I have access to a file, I'll be able to discover it in search. Sorry. All right. One of the most important things, oops, I see a question. Jen, do you want to come off mute and ask your question? Galen, are you able to promote Jen?
Okay, I just promoted her.
Okay.
There you go. I was typing. One thing we've run into with the content lifecycle, and I was curious if there was anything in there that helped with documents that get published and shared as PDFs, keeping track of that original version that's maybe in somebody's OneDrive or in the team site, that sort of thing.
Oh my God, that is a phenomenal question. And I'm not going to give you one single, I will solve the problems of the world answer. But I'll tell you how I try to encourage people to think about it. First thing, so I'll just tell you something personal about me. I wish I could be a developer, because when you are a developer, the answer to every question is yes, when do you need it? And basically we can do anything. When you're a business analyst or an information architect like me, the answer to every question is either nope, sorry, you can't do that out of the box, or why is it that you need that? Or what are you trying to accomplish? So I'm unfortunately the kind of person who has to say no. That question, the first thing I try to do with the PDF issue is ask why a document actually has to be converted to PDF in the first place. So recommendation number one is to store your documents in native format. Because remember, this is the thing that sometimes is sort of a hump for people to get over. When you publish a document to a place where everyone can consume it, just because publishing it in native format, if I don't have edit rights to that location, I can't change it. So if you think that you are protecting people from editing a document by publishing it in PDF format, well, the other thing you have to know is that when you take a PDF and download it and open it in Word 2016, unless that document's been protected, I can edit it. So it's not even like I need a full version of Acrobat often to
Right.
prevent me from editing that document. So first thing I try to do is to get people to just not bother publishing in PDF. That way I can do what I really want, which is a move. It goes from OneDrive to Teams to SharePoint, or maybe it just goes OneDrive straight to your SharePoint communication site, and it never actually has to be a PDF. I don't know if that's going to work in your use cases, but I would try to get as many of I would try to make as much of the lifecycle flow, skip the PDF part.
Right.
If you can. Now, sometimes we do want to put things in PDF, either for size, or we want, they're really designed to be printed, and we don't know if people are printing on A4 paper or 8.5 by 11, and we want that print experience to be consistent. In that case, we have to have very clear governance guidelines about what to do with the document that backs up a PDF, because what's likely to happen is the person who so it's out there for consumption in PDF format, but if we don't have a very clear guidance about where it is the original, the person who has to update it 3 years from now is going to have no clue where the original Word document is.
Right.
And so two things I often recommend there. Number one is you can, for any document that you're going to publish in PDF on your sort of organization facing site, you can have a source file or a source document library on that site where you move the original. Keep it together and hide that source library from visitors. So only editors can see that file, and turn it off from search so the content isn't discovered in search. And that way you have a container which you can hide from search and secure, a complete container where you can store all the originals. And if that would be sort of my option number two, if you have to do it that way.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Probably 5 other ways to do this as well. Those are number one is my first one is, oh, why PDF? I'd love to be able to say yes. Number 2 is, can you keep them together but in separate places so that only editors find the original? And that actually is more future proof than keeping them in a team site, which is what I most often see people do. But then the team is reconfigured and different people are part of it, and then we never know exactly which team site has it. And the whole thing, my whole principle, which is really important for knowledge management, is one copy of a document. One and only one, which means you have to move things through the life cycle. And of course, and then you have what I'll call the PDF wrinkle. So that's my answer to the PDF wrinkle. Good, better.
No. Excellent.
Right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure, my pleasure. Great question, by the way. All right. So the other thing we have to make sure that when we're sort of thinking about knowledge management is that we have to make sure that the environment in which we operate is going to protect people from seeing things that they're not supposed to see. And that's another great thing. All of these capabilities are in Microsoft 365. We really don't have to do anything other than take advantage of them. And so the platform on which we live on a day-to-day basis includes the ability to not just give people information, but also to protect them from what they're not supposed to see. If you're into, so now in addition to content management and control superpowers, my favorite capability, again, with or without Project Cortex, is the amazing discovery superpowers that we have in Microsoft 365. And what's amazing about this is that even without, again, the great superpowers of Cortex, there are some capabilities that are coming to us no matter what. So in many ways, for me, people are the most important part of my knowledge flow. And one of my favorite features in Microsoft 365 is what I'm going to call the delivery of expertise or people information anywhere. If you see someone's name and then you click on it, whether you see the name in a document library or in a people web part anywhere in Microsoft 365, the rich information that we have about that person, including where they sit in the organization, all of their contact information is all readily available to us no matter where they are, even if they don't bother to fill out their profile. If we can get people to fill out a profile by adding expertise topics to the profile, now we have an even richer capability to learn more about that person when we find the person, but all of the expertise topics become searchable attributes that Microsoft Search will find if I want to search on a particular area of expertise. One of the features that you're only going to get with Project Cortex is the ability to prompt people with, hey, Sue, I think you know about knowledge management. Should we add that to your expertise area? That, of course, obviously is part of the dream. But if you don't have it, people can still update their own profile. The place you want people to make the updates in their profile is in the you can also ask me about area. That is the place where that's actually the place that Cortex will connect to, and that's your declaration of your primary areas of expertise. So this is one really important capability that would be great to promote in your organization. Where I used to work, again, it was consulting. We had this theory that if you don't know something that we care about, why are we employing you? If you don't advertise that you know something we care about, how are we going to put you on projects? And because everyone wants to get put on really cool projects, keeping your profile up to date was really core to our DNA. Teams also has a really cool capability to bring the knowledge of the organization into, again, where people are working. In order to deploy the WhoBot experience, you add Who as an app to Teams. It's a Microsoft app that is connected to the entire profile database in Microsoft 365. And using any of the syntax that's on my slide, who knows about, who works with, who reports to, who is the manager of, you can explore your content, your people database, if you're the people who work in your organization, to find expertise in the moment. I think of the WhoBot as being a way of, you're interested in a topic and you want to find who in the organization you can call to ask questions about that topic. And the assumption here is that you are in Microsoft Teams and you want to be able to take advantage of narrow expertise-driven search. You don't need to be in Teams to find people this way. In fact, I'll show you some other examples. You can find expertise topics in Outlook, because again, if you hover over anyone in Outlook, you'll also find that person. Now with Project Cortex, you're also going to be able, this second piece of this is a Project Cortex feature that you can pull up the topic card when you have Project Cortex, but even without it, you're still going to be able to see expertise information about that person, no matter where you find them. The other really cool feature is if I'm not in Teams, I can be in Bing or I can be in Microsoft and SharePoint search, and I can also pivot my search around people. So a new capability in search is the ability to return people side by side with content, and then click on a person and pivot your search to be people focused. But today, if you search for a topic and click the people vertical in search, search will scope your search to people who match that topic, whatever you wrote about, whether the topic is in their expertise, their title, their department, their office location, or any attribute that search can reason over. So again, even without doing anything custom or adding anything to what we've got in the toolkit, we've got the ability to find people and their expertise. One thing I want to point out, this works because you have an environment in which everybody uploads their own content. In order to associate me with my expertise, you want to make sure that your organization is not doing what we used to do in my organization, whereas if you wanted a document published, no one wants to take the time to post it where it's supposed to go, so they email it to Debbie, and Debbie does the uploading. If that's how our things are going, if you have a concierge model of posting content, the expert that gets identified for most of your content is going to be Debbie. And that's not really what we want. So one of the things we need to think about is who's posting content. That one of the advantages, obviously, of working in Microsoft Teams is I'm going to post my own content. However, we have to remember that if a team is private, that content isn't necessarily available to the entire organization, because you're only going to find content that is open to you based on permissions. So one of the newer features of search that you should be seeing very soon is the ability to search not only over files and people and sites and news, but also conversations, whether those conversations take place in Yammer or Teams. I did notice, well, this is actually available. The conversation search is available in Bing right now. And for a hot minute, it searched my Teams conversations. Right now, it appears to only search my Yammer conversations, but I know that Teams conversations are coming back in. And remember, a lot of knowledge management is focused on sort of two kinds of knowledge: explicit knowledge that is written down, typically in the form of a document, or more and more in the form of a video, but searchable via a transcript. And then tacit knowledge, which is really that which is mostly in people's heads, but gets made explicit in the form of conversations. So being able to search both explicit document kind of content with conversational content allows us to search not only for what has been formally written down, but also what people are talking about, which is a way of getting tacit knowledge into our knowledge corpus in the organization. Other things that are coming to search for everybody is the ability to search images and image content. Today, not something we even have to wait for, is we have the ability to curate search experiences, which again is an enormous way of keeping knowledge in the flow. This is something I recommend to everyone that I work with, and that is that you identify what your key assets are and what the search terms that people might be using to find those key assets. And those assets can be a site, a document, an application. The content can live in your tenant or can live in another tenant, and curate those search results using search bookmarks. And a bookmark is basically buying your way to the top of search results. They're really cool because you have the ability to target a bookmark to a specific audience, to have a bookmark in place for a specific period of time, for a specific geographic location, and to then deprecate a bookmark when it's no longer needed. I think this is, although it is of course highly manual, a way that we can ensure that people find what they need without having to scroll through search results. A feature that I know is coming for bookmarks is the concept of a suggested bookmark, where and that's where Microsoft 365 can sort of reason over your bookmarks and then in the administration window show you, hey, do you want, these are the terms people are searching for frequently, here are the targets that they are finding, do you want to make a bookmark for this? And that, I think, will make the management of bookmarks much, much easier. I know that Microsoft has a dedicated team of people who actually work on keeping their bookmarks up to date. One of the things that I do is when I launch a new site on an intranet that I'm working on, I talk to the site owners about what kind of terms people might be searching for to get the content on their site. And we try to see if we can create a bookmark as one of the many different ways we're going to use to promote the content on that site. And I'm going to take a breath now. Does anybody have any questions about this? Anybody using bookmarks today? Anyone not using them and now want to use them? So if you aren't using bookmarks today, what I love about them is you don't need custom code. You don't need to be a developer. You really just need to understand what are we doing in the organization. Acronyms is another really great thing. There is a built-in acronym dictionary in Microsoft Search. It's maintained by the search admin. What's really cool about this is if you complete the values in the acronym dictionary, it's got its own little syntax. So for example, if you just type in KM, you are not going to get the acronym that defines KM means knowledge management. But if you type in what is KM, or define KM, you'll get those results. Search, there really is only one Microsoft Search. This is another sort of benefit to being part of the suite. It is, over time, going to end any place you see search, you will get the same search experience, same technology behind it, although when you're using search in Word, your results will be scoped to Word, but it'll be the same outcome that you'll get if you search for it at office.com or from SharePoint or from Teams. Again, but contextually relevant to the place where you are when you're searching. This is a journey that Microsoft has been on for quite a while, sort of making a consistent search experience everywhere you are. The most recent announcements is that this great new modern search experience is going to come to classic sites as well. All right, so I'm going to just flip over out of technology a little bit and talk about one of the heart of many, many knowledge management initiatives is the ability to connect and collaborate with people with similar interests and expertise. The community itself, creating a community, really is not all about technology, but it's really hard to have a community of practice without, especially in a global organization, and of course, while we're all working from home, you can't really have a community of practice without having a technical back-end way of connecting the community. Yammer is the community of practice hero application in the Microsoft suite. There are all kinds of great capabilities to leverage Yammer to give your communities a boost. There's the ability to moderate a conversation. In fact, having a moderator role is what I think is probably the key feature that every community should have. If you want to make a community of practice successful, someone has to take on the role of moderation. One of the reasons you want to do that is to make sure that no question is left behind. A community that gets a question where no one answers is going to be a community that dies pretty quickly. One of the newer capabilities inside Yammer is to be able to look at data about how many questions have been answered, how many questions are left outstanding, how many questions have a best answer identified as a result, and then looking at questions also where you can upvote answers. Oh, I agree with them. And what all of these features do is they allow you to either pin the best answer to a question or pin it or sort of move up in the relationship between a question and its results. The more votes an answer gets, the closer that result is to the top. Again, to make it easier for people to find the answers to think questions that they're looking for without having to spend hours and hours searching around. And so one of the sort of the foundational things that almost every knowledge manager creates in their organizations are communities of practice. And with these capabilities in Yammer, you can really help your community come to life and monitor what's happening in the community as well. And so you're probably all aware that we can do live events in Yammer, and we have this new immersive experience that allows you to, again, when you're doing a live event, moderate questions and comments. Great for sort of very big, broad experiences. Yammer conversations, as I said earlier, are in search, and a capability that was announced just yesterday is another really great feature is that Yammer conversations can also be featured or found in the activity feed in Microsoft Teams. And so if you install the Yammer app in Teams, you can also see all of your Yammer community conversations in the context of, again, Teams. So boost an announcement by making a priority, and then here's the ability to feature a conversation, featured conversations in Teams. One of the capabilities that was announced at Ignite that hasn't come out yet is the ability to take a SharePoint post and feature it into Teams. What is released, however, is the ability to create a news article or a page for that matter in SharePoint and post it to Yammer to increase visibility, to engage people around it. You're effectively posting a link to the news article, but you can then attach it to a poll, ask a question about it to encourage conversation and engagement in your communities based on things that are happening in the organization. And so this is the feature that literally was announced yesterday, is bringing Yammer. Bringing Yammer into Teams is not new. Getting notified in Teams about Yammer announcements and mentions, that's what was announced yesterday. Super, super cool. And then this sending SharePoint news to Yammer should be, I think, in everyone's tenant either now or rolling out very soon, and that is effectively the ability to post a news article directly into Yammer. Couple of other things that you can do in Yammer. Now, this is kind of an interesting one because this is a place where Yammer and Project Cortex are going to have some crossover. Yammer recently changed the topic experience so that topics, instead of entering them with a hashtag, which is how you used to do it, you now actually indicate you're effectively adding metadata to your conversation. Hashtags still work in Yammer. They're at the individual post level, but you can associate an entire Yammer conversation with a topic. The new Yammer topic also lets you have a description associated with the topic. Just like Yammer topics today, if you see a topic associated with a Yammer thread and click on it, you will be taken to a predefined search page that has all of the conversations associated with that topic across the entire Yammer suite. So any place that conversation, that topic has been discussed, you'll be able to see it directly from any individual Yammer post. And you can, of course, follow a topic as well. If an organization has both Yammer communities and Project Cortex, there's a rationalization of those topics, and the Yammer topics and the Project Cortex topics can be the same. And so that if I click on a Yammer topic, I can also go to my Cortex topic page, and those Yammer topics will be curated into the Project Cortex topic of the same name. I think it's not been made totally clear, but I know that this is true. You don't need Project Cortex to take advantage of the new modern topic experience in Yammer. When you do add them together, you get an even better experience. But the ability to follow a topic and to see popular topics in a community, that's going to come to everyone that's using Yammer for their communities of practice. I'm going to take a little breath here. Any questions about that? All right. So a couple of other things. One of the things that we want to do in communities of practice is kind of identify the best answer to things. Not every question has one and only one answer. And so one of the things that you can do is you can indicate that one answer is best if that's true. But if multiple answers could solve a problem, I'm really kind of a big fan of the ability to upvote. And so if there's more than one answer, what you want to see is what's the most recognized answer. And so this capability allows you to collect multiple good answers to a question. And again, this is another way of ensuring that the knowledge of the organization is available to people if they have, when they have a question, you can go search and see, has this ever been asked? And then you can see kind of what's popular in for that particular question. So again, this is just a screenshot of what happens when you bring Yammer into Teams. If you aren't doing this already, 100%, you really, really want to add the Yammer app into Teams. And when you do that, that will give you the ability to see the Yammer activities, Yammer feed in the activity feed in Teams. So, this is the kind of thing when you want to think about this is that you really want to, the whole idea of knowledge management is to bring the knowledge of the organization to people where they're working. Today, we can bring Yammer into Teams so that if the team is where I'm getting my day-to-day work done with the people I know and on the projects that I'm working, and Yammer is my extended communities for people I may not know, focused more on the major topics of the organization. Bringing them both together in one place allows me as an end user, as a user, to search for that content and experience that content without leaving my team's bubble, if you will. Even more importantly is the idea of bringing the rest of your knowledge base into Teams. And that is probably the one feature that I am most excited about from the Ignite announcements is the ability to bring your intranet into Teams. Now you may be thinking, well, you can absolutely bring a SharePoint site into Teams today, and you can, but when you do that, you lose all the navigation because you do not The navigation doesn't work. On-page navigation works, but top navigation, all the ways you've curated your beautiful mega menus, don't work in Microsoft Teams. Well, all that is about to change with the home site app in Teams. The idea is you have your intranet and you have a site that is designated as your intranet front door called your home site. That home site can itself be an application that comes into Teams, and your home site navigation, which will be experienced in the SharePoint app bar, which is what Microsoft is calling global navigation for Microsoft 365. Your global navigation is going to be brought into Teams. In this screenshot, it shows Contoso. In my tenant, where I've got an early preview of the SharePoint app bar, if you don't have a branded icon, it'll just look like a little house. And when you click it, the global navigation for your intranet is now visible and available to you everywhere in Microsoft 365 when you're on a browser, but also at the end of this first quarter is when it's targeted for, also in Microsoft Teams. Any questions about that? So I will say I have not had a chance to play with the app in Teams. That has not been available to me, but I've had the global navigation. I've had global navigation for a couple of weeks now. Nothing's broken. Everything seems to work. The only thing I'm not super crazy about is that the navigation is in a little narrow vertical when you're in SharePoint, and when you're in Teams, it's also going to be vertical navigation. That means you just have to wrap your head around this. That means you can't have a mega menu. Although you may see it as a mega menu when you're in SharePoint, when you move it to the left rail, that you can't see a mega menu from the left rail. So your nav is going to be experienced as a cascading experience when it is brought into both the global navigation suite and then, of course, also into Microsoft Teams. So just something to be aware of. I don't think any kittens are going to die, but it is something you want to think about as you're communicating that to your users. Okay, so now we've brought all the content everywhere. We've delivered it. We've discovered it. Next sort of final thing about making knowledge flow in the organization is you really want to measure, are we successful? Knowledge management is one of those things I call squishy. Kind of hard to know if you're successful if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish. It's critically important to understand why we are investing in knowledge management technologies and what we expect them to accomplish from the business perspective, to understand what are our business outcome goals. And those are the kind of metrics that we want to use to determine, are we being successful with the investments that we're making? System metrics, which Microsoft is improving all the time, will help us know a proxy for, are we delivering value? But business metrics are what really help us decide, are we moving the needle? Are we winning more customer engagements? Are we improving the ability to get people up to speed quickly? Are we creating more proposals? Are we creating more successful proposals? We really need to look at, when we're thinking about knowledge management initiatives, what are we trying to accomplish from a business perspective? Those are the key metrics. Those are sort of the holy grail of knowledge management, but we have a lot of really good metrics that we can use to infer or get some insights into those key metrics, those key business decisions. So some of the insights we can get from pages are which pages and articles are viewed the most. When do we want to post something? We get a little heat map of when people are actually reading the content that we're posting. We get insights about how many comments have, about engagement around pages and articles, how many likes, how many comments, which are a measure of engagement. And we're getting some new metrics for SharePoint that will help us determine how effective are we at keeping knowledge in the flow of all of our users. This is kind of a cool new feature that'll be rolling out soon, that after you publish a news post, SharePoint's going to send a digest to the page author showing you what kind of information that people got out of it. Like, were people reading it? How many people saw it? And maybe what might you want to do to help boost readership? The other thing that you'll start to see is, as you're typing a very long page, an estimate of how long it's going to take for someone to read it, with the idea being that if you're going to write something that's going to take 10 minutes to read, the likelihood of anyone getting to the bottom of that page is basically slim to none, encouraging you to take the time to write more concisely so that you have a better shot at having people consume that information. Yammer is getting a whole suite of really cool, great insights to help us know how are our knowledge communities doing and what are people seeing. Insights into conversations and click-through rates, who's attending things in live meetings, and of course, my personal favorite is the ability to look at what kind of questions are being, whether questions are being answered, how many are being answered. Every Yammer community manager can know what's going on in their own community. And then at the tenant level, we can look at which communities are actually performing very well, compare them to lower performing communities in order to encourage people, what should we be doing different? So lots and lots of really great metrics coming out for Yammer. And again, knowledge management is super squishy, and we don't want to make investments unless they're going to drive the business. The only way to know are we doing it right is to gather information about things that matter. And we're starting to get these better information that effectively is a proxy for are we delivering value in our organizations. So just to kind of wrap this all up, as I started out with, at the end of the day, I don't care how great the technology is. The technology is really great. You can't command knowledge out of people's heads. Conversation is critically important. Trust is probably the most important organizational criteria to help knowledge management be successful. We have to make sure that we create a safe space in which people can have conversations. We need to recognize and reward people for sharing the knowledge that we have. And if we can establish that framework, that organizational people and process framework, we have a ton of technology superpowers to help us deliver against those knowledge management objectives. And that's basically my story. We can do all these wonderful things. We have these superpowers. And if you move to, I think it's another room in the conference to listen to Jeff Willinger talk about Project Cortex, you can learn how you can take what you're currently doing and then bring it to the next level with what's available and coming out from Project Cortex. So this is all the gazillion ways you have to contact me. Galen, I think I'm supposed to submit my slides, and I do have a version of my slides that I can share, and I will make sure that those are available if anyone wants them. And I think we have a few minutes for questions if anyone wants to chat.